Now, as we've been hearing, the Chancellor, George Osborne, says he believes the government can meet the huge cuts in public spending signalled in the autumn statement. But the government's spending watchdog says the scale of savings needed will pose a significant challenge. Well, we can speak to Adam Memon, who's head of economic research at the Centre for Policy Studies, a centre-right think tank co-founded by Lady Thatcher. Thank you very much for joining us. George Osborne says it is exaggeration to say the spending cuts won't be achievable and the level of them. What are your thoughts?
Well, there's no doubt that it will be quite difficult. If you look at the areas of budgets which aren't protected from 2009 to the end of the next Parliament, there are pretty sizable cuts, but that doesn't mean to say that it's not possible. Especially when you look at some of the savings which have already been made. So in some budgets there are constantly efficiencies which can be made, but also I think a greater imagination, looking at whether different departments can be merged. There are plenty of things which can be done. It won't be easy, but it is certainly possible.
And 60% of spending cuts still to come. I mean, the expectation had been that 80% of the necessary spending cuts would have already happened by now. So it's an indication of how much further there is to go.
Well, yes, certainly, but I think there are a few things at play here. So firstly, there's the question of productivity. So productivity has been very weak, much weaker than everyone expected, which has meant that wages haven't really grown and tax revenues haven't really increased as much as has been expected. But as productivity increases, tax revenues should rise. It means that the size of the economy should increase as well, which makes generally it easier to cut spending later on. Definitely, the progress has been slow than had been anticipated to start off with, but certainly if you look at local government, for example, or if you look at other aspects, the Communities Department, where they've actually taken quite big cuts already, and if you look at how the public views public services like libraries or other such things, their opinion of how services are being delivered is actually not changed that much since 5 years ago.
I mean, obviously, when public services are cut, it saves money to the national purse. But it will inevitably result in some shrinkage in the economy as well, in GDP, because people will be losing their jobs and won't, will be requiring potentially benefits and won't have the resources to spend that they had. So it requires an extra stepping up of the private sector, doesn't it? I mean, what's the evidence on how much the private sector will step up when the public sector shrinks?
Well, it doesn't mean, so it's quite important, it doesn't mean that the economy will shrink. It does mean that government as a proportion of GDP will shrink. So it means that government overall, compared to the size of the economy, will get smaller. There's no doubt about that. That will definitely happen. But if you look at forecasts in 2010 and compare that to what happened to public sector employment compared to private sector employment, and actually the increase in private sector employment has been many, many times more than the reduction in public sector employment. And there's no reason to suggest why that progress won't continue. There's definitely going to be continued reductions in the public sector workforce. I think the OBR is forecasting public sector employment to be about 13% of total employment compared to 19% in 2010. So that process will continue, but as long as the performances supply side and productivity improves and there is continuous general macroeconomic stability, private sector employment should increase. It does depend on business investment rising. It does depend upon us being able to export more, but there's no reason to think why private sector can't also increase.
Adam Memon, thank you very much. Bring you some breaking news.